James Carter stood on the rooftop of Carter & Cone, a gleaming glass and steel structure in the heart of Charleston, like a lighthouse etched with his name. At 38, the white American man with dark brown hair and piercing blue eyes had reached the summit of ambition. His Italian suit was impeccably tailored, hugging his frame perfectly, yet he kept adjusting the knot of his tie, loosening it again, as if nothing could hide the unrest rising in his chest. In just 6 days, he would marry Sophia Langston, the daughter of a powerful family, and dubbed the jewel of South Carolina's elite. But James's mind was not on the lavish wedding or the million-dollar contracts waiting on his desk. It drifted back to a woman he had left 7 years ago, Maya Thompson. The rooftop was silent, with only the soft wind brushing past meticulously tended potted plants. James stepped to the edge, looking down at the city. Charleston stretched beneath him, a painting of cobblestone streets and old rooftops. But all of it felt distant. From his pocket, he pulled out a cream-colored envelope, its address handwritten in blue ink. Maya Thompson, James Island. His handwriting, careful, hesitant, like a confession not yet complete. The envelope was an invitation to his wedding with Sophia. But it was more than a social gesture. It was a question he dared not say aloud. Did she still remember him? Was she happy? Or had she forgotten those nights they sat beneath the oak tree, sharing dreams of a simple life? 7 years ago, James had left Maya, a black American woman with a radiant smile and a warm heart, to pursue his architecture career in Dubai. Back then, he convinced himself that ambition was everything, that love was a luxury he couldn't afford. With her evening sketch sessions on the porch and the scent of basil in her hair, Maya represented a life he feared would hold him back. He chose skyscrapers over quiet moments with her. But now, standing atop a pinnacle of success, with architecture awards stacked in his office, features in national magazines, and a luxury apartment scented with teak, James felt empty. His success felt like a perfect blueprint missing its soul. He turned back to his desk as his phone buzzed. A message from Sophia appeared on the screen. Final tasting at 6. Dad wants your opinion on the appetizers. James didn't respond. He set the envelope beside the phone, his fingers brushing the name Maya Thompson. 7 years was a long time, long enough for someone to build a whole new life. Had Maya found happiness? Did she have a family or a husband? Or was she still living alone in that small house on James Island, where they once dreamed of a future? These questions gnawed at him like a sketch left unfinished. The elevator dinged, and Emily, James's younger sister, stepped out. With her blonde hair tied high and a fitted tangerine dress, Emily exuded the energy of someone who always had things under control. She held a clipboard and glanced at the envelope on the desk. Still thinking about sending it? She asked, voice both curious and concerned. James shrugged, trying to sound casual. I'm not sure. I think Maya deserves to know. Emily crossed her arms, eyes sharp. Know what? That you're marrying someone else? Or have you still not gotten over her? She stepped closer, her voice lowered. James, you're at the top. Sophia is the perfect match, not just for you, but for Carter & Cone. Inviting your ex to the wedding isn't closing a chapter. It's reopening a door you're unsure you want to walk through. James looked at his sister, sensing the sincerity in her words. Emily had always been the pragmatic anchor that kept him grounded. But this time, he didn't want to listen to reason. I don't want to pretend Maya never existed, he said quietly. She's part of me, Emily, even though I left her. Emily sighed and placed a hand on his shoulder. If you send the letter, make sure you know what you're doing. Not for Maya, for yourself. She pointed to the envelope. Send it or throw it away. But don't let it haunt you. James didn't answer. He picked up the envelope, feeling its weight in his hand. 7 years ago, he had left without a goodbye, leaving only a brief message. "I must go, Maya. I'll call you." He never did. But now, with his wedding to Sophia approaching, memories of Maya surged back more vividly than ever. He remembered her smile, the way she'd press her forehead to his when they argued, and the last thing she ever said under the oak tree. "Please don't make me wonder, James." And that's precisely what he did. Left her wondering, guessing, for 7 years. After Emily left, James sat at his desk and opened his laptop. An email from his lawyer popped up, reminding him about the prenuptial agreement with Sophia. Assets, company shares, and financial terms were detailed. Another blueprint awaiting his signature. But he didn't read it. Instead, he opened an old folder on his computer, where he'd saved sketches he had once drawn for Maya. A small house with a wide porch, a garden full of basil, and a swing beneath an oak tree. It was their dream, which he'd abandoned in pursuit of towers in Dubai. He stood, took the envelope, and walked to the building's internal mail chute. His fingers hovered over the slot. To send the letter meant reopening a sealed door, risking everything. The wedding, his career, the peace he had so carefully constructed. But not sending it meant living with the question, what if I hadn't left Maya? In the end, he let the envelope fall, hearing the soft thud of paper landing below. It wasn't a decisive act, just a fragile hope that Maya, wherever she was, would understand he had never truly forgotten her. Somewhere on James Island, in a small house surrounded by blooming flowers, Maya Thompson might be holding that envelope, and the story they thought was over might just be about to begin again. Maya Thompson pushed a wheelbarrow full of soil through the Harmony Community Garden on James Island, her rubber gloves caked in mud. Children's laughter echoed from the nearby vegetable beds, where a group of kids eagerly pulled up carrots under the guidance of volunteer teachers. Maya's passion project was this garden, an oasis of green carved out from an abandoned city lot. She had transformed it into a place that nurtured not just plants, but hope for the community, sustained by small grants and sheer willpower. The gentle sunlight bathed rows of kale and sunflowers today, but Maya's mind wasn't there. It was pulled toward a letter sitting in her jacket pocket. "Mom, look at this." Zoe, Maya's 6-year-old daughter, came running, her curly hair bouncing, her bright blue eyes sparkling. She held up a lopsided carrot like a prized treasure. "I found buried treasure." Maya smiled, kneeling to wipe dirt from Zoe's cheek. "The most beautiful carrot in the garden, Zoe. Go rinse it off. We'll taste it together." Zoe nodded and dashed toward the faucet, leaving Maya in a moment of stillness. She pulled the envelope from her jacket, her fingers grazing the handwritten name, Maya Thompson. There was no return address, but the handwriting, precise, slightly slanted, was unmistakable. James Carter, the man who had left her 7 years ago, without a word left behind, only a fleeting message and a dozen unanswered questions. She opened the envelope slowly, afraid it might disappear. Inside was a wedding invitation, printed on ivory paper with gold embossed lettering. James Carter and Sophia Langston cordially invite you to their wedding. The date was 6 days away at the Langston estate, known throughout Charleston as a symbol of power and extravagance. Maya stared at the invitation, her heart pounding. 7 years of silence, no calls, no emails, and now James invited her to witness him build a life with someone else. Was it a greeting? An apology? Or is it simply unintentional cruelty? "Mom?" Zoe returned, holding the freshly rinsed carrot, her voice tentative. "Are you sad?" Maya quickly folded the invitation and slipped it into her pocket. She smiled and pulled Zoe into a hug. "No, I'm just thinking. It's a letter from an old friend." Zoe tilted her head, her bright eyes trying to read her mother's thoughts. "Is it the person you told me about when I asked where my dad was?" Her question cut like a small blade, sharp but not meant to wound. Maya had told Zoe vague stories about a faraway friend to fill the void of her curiosity about her father. She had never lied, but she'd never told the whole truth either. "Let's say yes," Maya replied, brushing Zoe's hair. "But right now, we have to bring that carrot home to Grandma, don't we?" Zoe nodded, though her eyes fixed on her mother as if sensing something important was happening. That evening, in the small house with a porch full of basil pots, Maya sat in an armchair, the invitation resting on the coffee table. The golden glow from a desk lamp warmed the room, but couldn't quiet the unease inside her. Maya's mother, Ruth, emerged from the kitchen with 2 cups of chamomile tea. She glanced at the invitation and took a seat opposite Maya. "I saw the letter in your pocket," Ruth said, her voice gentle but sharp. "It's from him." Maya nodded, eyes down. "James. He's getting married." Ruth sipped her tea, eyes steady on her daughter. "And what are you thinking? Why would you go to that wedding?" Maya sighed, her fingers circling her teacup. "I don't know. Maybe I want to see him, to be sure I've moved on. Or perhaps I should show him I'm no longer the girl who sat waiting for a call that would never come." Ruth set down her cup, her voice firm. "Maya, you built a whole world for yourself and Zoe. The garden, this community. It's all because of you. Don't let him pull you back into the past." Maya looked at her mother, memories flooding in. 7 years ago, when she found out she was pregnant with Zoe, she called James, who was then in Dubai. His assistant, a cold voice over the phone, said James was unavailable. She had sent him a letter, but it was returned with the words, "refused." She cried every night. Not because James had left, but because she had to learn how to become a mother alone. But that pain had forged her into the woman she was now, a woman who rose from the wreckage and created the Harmony Garden. James no longer had the power to hurt her. At least, that's what she wanted to believe. Maya said, "I don't want to go back," her voice firmer, "but I need closure, so Zoe doesn't grow up with a mother who still carries unanswered questions." Ruth tilted her head, her eyes softening. "So, are you planning to take Zoe with you?" Maya nodded. "If I go, Zoe goes with me. I don't want to hide her. And if James sees her—" She paused, unable to say the rest. If James saw Zoe, he would recognize her blue eyes, eyes exactly like his. Would he ask questions? Did he deserve to know the truth? Ruth stood and placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. "You're stronger than he is, Maya. Don't forget that. If you go, go with a light heart, not to prove anything." Maya took her mother's hand, offering a faint smile. "I'll try." After Ruth left the room, Maya picked up the invitation again. She remembered the nights she and James had sat under the oak tree, sketching out a small house with a porch full of flowers. He once promised never to let her wonder, but he had broken that promise. Now, this invitation was her chance to face him, not for lost love, but for herself and Zoe. She stood and placed the invitation in the drawer. The decision was made. She would attend the wedding, not to win James back, but to look him in the eye and know she had found a strength he never saw. Somewhere, in a skyscraper in Charleston, James Carter had no idea that the question he sent in the mail was on its way back, carrying a truth that would change his life forever. Maya Thompson sat on the porch, the lights from the Harmony Community Garden casting flickering shadows across the wooden floorboards through the rows of basil pots. The wedding invitation from James Carter lay on her lap, the paper corners slightly crumpled from being opened and closed too many times. Inside the house, Zoe's voice softly hummed a lullaby from the bedroom, but Maya couldn't relax. Every time her eyes fell on the names James Carter and Sophia Langston, her chest tightened, not from jealousy, but from an old pain, like a scar she thought had healed, still aching when touched. Ruth, Maya's mother, pushed open the screen door, holding a dish towel in one hand. She sat in the armchair opposite, her gaze sharp but gentle. "You still haven't decided, have you?" Ruth asked, her voice calm and low. Maya nodded, her fingers tracing the handwritten lettering on the envelope. "I don't know if going is right or wrong, Mom. Part of me wants to see him, to prove I'm stronger now. But another part..." She paused, inhaling deeply. "I'm afraid of reopening something I've tried so hard to bury." Ruth set the towel down and leaned forward. "Do you remember when Zoe had that high fever when she was just 2? You stayed up all night, holding her, calling doctors. Not once did you think about him. You got through the hardest days alone, Maya. Going to that wedding won't make you weak, but you have to know why you're going." Maya looked at her mother, the memories of long, solitary nights rushing back. When Zoe was still a baby, she often sat on this porch, staring out at the garden, wondering if she had the strength to raise her child without James. She had called him once when Zoe was 3 months old, hoping he might want to know about his daughter. But James's assistant, her voice cold as ice, had cut her off. "Mr. Carter doesn't take personal calls." Maya never called again. Instead, she poured herself into building the Harmony Garden, creating a space where Zoe could grow up surrounded by joy and community. James had no right to shake the world she'd built, but somehow, this invitation had managed to do just that. "I don't want Zoe to grow up with a mother still carrying pain," Maya said, her voice steadier now. "If I go, I want it to be for me, not for him." Ruth smiled, her eyes glinting with pride. "Then go. But take Zoe with you. Don't hide her. If he sees her, he'll have to face himself." Maya nodded, though her stomach twisted. With her bright smile and blue eyes, Zoe was James's living reflection. If he saw her, would he recognize it? And if he did he deserve a place in Zoe's life? She stood, placing the invitation on the table. "I'll go, Mom, just for one evening, to close the chapter." Ruth took her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "You're stronger than you think, Maya. Don't let him forget that." The next morning, Maya stood in front of her bedroom mirror, trying on a simple pale blue dress. Zoe sat cross-legged on the bed, hugging her stuffed bear, Mr. Stripey, eyes curiously following her mother's every move. "Mom, where are we going that you're wearing a pretty dress?" Zoe chirped. Maya turned and smiled. "We're going somewhere special. There will be lots of flowers and sweets, just for a few hours. And then we'll come back and eat pizza with Grandma, okay?" Zoe squealed and jumped off the bed. "Will there be cupcakes? Grandma says weddings always have cupcakes." Maya laughed, though the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She knelt to fix Zoe's curly hair. "There may be, but you have to promise to stay close to me, all right? There will be lots of people there." Zoe nodded, clutching Mr. Stripey tight. "I promise. But are you sad because of that old friend?" Zoe's question made Maya pause. She looked into her daughter's eyes, those unmistakably James's eyes, and replied gently, "I'm not sad. I want to see that friend one last time, to say goodbye. Zoe tilted her head as if weighing her mother's words. If he's your friend, he'll like me too, right? Maya pulled her daughter close, breathing deeply to keep her voice steady. Who wouldn't like you, Zoe? But inside, she wondered, would James deserve Zoe's affection if he knew the truth? That afternoon, Maya checked her email on her phone. A notification from the Harmony Garden Grant Committee popped up. They had approved additional funding for after-school gardening classes, but required her financial report by the end of the week. She sighed and closed her laptop. Her life was filled with long work days, caring for Zoe and keeping the garden alive. James's invitation was an unwelcome disruption, but she couldn't let it shake the balance she had worked so hard to build. She opened a small box from the drawer. Inside was an old photo. Her and James sitting beneath the oak tree, him sketching a swing. One day, we'll have a house with this swing, Maya, he had said. She believed him, until he walked away without looking back. She closed the box, determined not to let that memory weaken her resolve. Zoe, ready yet? Maya called as she stood up. Zoe ran out, wearing a little white dress and holding Mr. Stripey in her arms. Ready, Mom. Let's go. Maya took her daughter's hand and stepped out the door. She wasn't going to win James back or prove anything to him. She was going to look him in the eyes to know she had moved on, and to ensure Zoe would never grow up with a mother burdened by unanswered questions. As their car rolled toward the Langston estate, Maya felt a new strength rising inside her. Not forgiveness, but freedom. Somewhere in a Charleston skyscraper, James Carter was preparing for his wedding rehearsal, unaware that Maya and Zoe were coming, bringing with them a truth that would change everything. Maya Thompson held tightly onto Zoe's hand as they stepped out of the old sedan, the lights from the Langston estate casting a soft glow on the cobblestone driveway. The sound of violins drifted from the back garden, where the wedding rehearsal occurred. Maya wore a pale blue dress, simple yet elegant, with her curly hair neatly clipped back. In a small white dress, Zoe hugged her stuffed bear, Mr. Stripey, her bright blue eyes scanning the dazzling scene. Mom! This place is like a castle! Zoe squealed, tugging Maya's hand. Do they have cupcakes? Maya smiled, though her heart pounded in her chest. We'll find out. But stay close to me, okay? She took a deep breath, trying to remain composed. She hadn't come to stir trouble or win James Carter back. She had come to face him, to look him in the eye, and know that in the 7 years since she had built a life worth being proud of without him. But as she stepped through the wrought iron gates, she felt the weight of the past press down on her shoulders. The Langston estate was a luxury monument, with rows of oak trees adorned with white lanterns and a glittering glass tent by the lakeside. Staff in pastel uniforms crept, carrying trays of wine and pastries. Maya led Zoe along the edge of the lawn, avoiding the clusters of guests chatting merrily. She didn't want attention, just a moment to see James, offer a simple congratulations, and leave. But fate had other plans. Maya? James's voice cut through the music. She turned, and the world slowed. He stood a few meters away, dressed in a gray suit, his dark brown hair tousled by the breeze. His blue eyes widened in shock, as if he couldn't believe she was truly there. Then his gaze dropped to Zoe, and he froze. Zoe looked up at him, tilted her head, and beamed. "You have eyes like me," she said, cheerful and innocent. James knelt to her level, lips parting, but no words coming. "Really?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "What's your name?" "Zoe," she replied, lifting Mr. Stripey. "This is my friend. Do you like teddy bears?" Maya felt her chest tighten. She looked at James and saw the flicker of confusion and realization in his eyes. He knew. The blue eyes, The smile, the way Zoe tilted her head, everything mirrored him. Maya gripped Zoe's hand tighter, anchoring herself to the present. "Zoe, let's find some cake," she said, her tone calm but firm. James stood, his eyes fixed on Zoe, then slowly shifted back to Maya. "Maya, you're here. I didn't think—" He trailed off, uncertain. "Congratulations," Maya said evenly. "I just came to wish you well. We won't be staying long." "Don't go yet," James said quickly, stepping closer. "I want to talk for just a minute." Before Maya could respond, a sharp voice cut in. "James, there you are." Sophia Langston approached in a form-fitting white silk dress, her blonde hair styled into an elegant updo. She smiled, but her eyes were cool as they swept over Maya and Zoe. "A guest of yours?" she asked sweetly, with an edge. James cleared his throat, clearly flustered. "Sophia, this is Maya Thompson, an old friend, and this is Zoe, her daughter." Sophia raised an eyebrow, glancing at Zoe before turning back to Maya. "Maya Thompson," she repeated, as if tasting the name. "I've heard of you. It is lovely to meet you." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Maya stood tall, unwavering. "I've heard of you too," she replied calmly. "Wishing you both happiness. Zoe, let's go." Zoe tugged on her mother's hand, looking up at James. "Do you have cupcakes? I want a pink one." James smiled faintly, his eyes still locked on Maya. "He said he'd find one for you, and then looked at Maya. Are you sure you have to leave? Just 1 minute, please." Sophia placed her manicured hand on James's arm, the red polish stark against his suit. "James, the photographer, is waiting. My father needs your approval for the seating. Ms. Thompson surely has other obligations, don't you?" She looked at Maya, her gaze like a challenge. Maya felt the tension but remained steady. "We do have plans," she said, her voice light but firm. "Have a good evening." She turned and walked away, leading Zoe toward the gate, sensing James's eyes on her back the whole way. "Mom, that man was nice," Zoe said as they reached the car. "Why didn't we stay for cake?" Maya opened the car door and helped Zoe into her seat. "Because I finished what I came to do," she said softly. But as she started the engine, her hands trembled. Seeing James, hearing his voice, and watching him look at Zoe brought back memories she thought she had buried. She remembered the night he left, her standing under the oak tree, begging him not to leave her, wondering. She had wondered for 7 years, and now she knew. James was wondering too, about Zoe. Meanwhile, at the estate, James stood frozen on the lawn as the violins faded into a distant hum. Zoe's image, those blue eyes, that innocent smile, her voice, was etched into his mind. He turned to look at Sophia, who spoke with a staff member, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Zoe was his daughter. He didn't need a DNA test to know it. But why hadn't Maya told him? And why had she left so quickly? "James!" Sophia called, her voice sharper. "What are you doing? We have 100 things to take care of." He nodded, but each step felt heavier as he followed her. In his mind, one thought consumed him. He had to find Maya. He had to know the truth, and he had to understand why, after 7 years, his heart still raced when he saw her. As the lanterns flickered in the oak trees, James knew the perfect life he had built had just cracked open, and the truth about Zoe would change everything. James Carter stood before the wooden gate of the Harmony Community Garden on James Island, his hands in his coat pockets, eyes scanning the rows of lush vegetables. Children's laughter echoed in the distance, but all he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. Last night, At the Langston estate, the image of Zoe, the little girl with blue eyes and a smile that mirrored his, had haunted him into sleeplessness. He had left the wedding rehearsal right after Maya and Zoe departed, abandoning Sophia with a furious gaze and a slew of unanswered questions. Now, he was standing before Maya's garden to seek the truth he knew would change everything. Maya was bent over a row of sunflowers, her gloves stained with soil. She looked up at the sound of footsteps on the gravel path, and her expression hardened when she saw James. She stood upright, wiped her hands on her jeans, and spoke calmly but sharply. "James, what are you doing here?" He inhaled deeply, trying to keep his voice steady. "I need to talk to Maya about Zoe." Maya crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. "Talk about what? You had your chance last night. I'm working now." James stepped closer, urgency in his tone. "Zoe, she has my eyes. She's my daughter, isn't she? I need to know the truth." Maya said nothing. Her stare seemed to pierce right through him. She turned and led him to a small corner near the tool shed, where the scent of cedar and basil lingered in the air. "Do you want the truth?" she asked, her voice low. "Fine. When I found out I was pregnant with Zoe, I called you. You were in Dubai, busy chasing skyscrapers. Your assistant told me you weren't taking personal calls. I sent letters. 3 of them, James. 1 was returned. I never heard back from the other 2. I tried, but you chose silence." James felt like he'd been punched in the chest. He shook his head, voice raw. "I didn't know, Maya. I swear. My assistant, she never told me anything. If I had known, if you had known, then what?" Maya cut in, her voice sharp. "You would have flown back? Stayed? I sent another message asking me to wait. I don't need you anymore, James. Zoe doesn't need a father who only shows up when convenient." Her words cut like a blade. James lowered his head, his hands clenched tightly. "I was wrong. I know I missed everything. Zoe's first steps and words. But I'm here now. I want to make it right." Maya let out a faint laugh, void of humor. "Zoe isn't your second chance, James. She's a whole person with dreams, fears, and a mother who's done everything to protect her. You don't get to walk in and claim a role." James looked at her, his eyes filled with pain, but also determination. "I'm not asking for anything right now. I just needed to know the truth. And if Zoe is mine, I want the chance to be a father, even if I have to start from the beginning." Maya turned away, resting her hands on a wooden table in the shed. She remembered the night she told Zoe stories, inventing a father from far away so her daughter wouldn't feel lacking. She had spent 7 years building a safe world for Zoe, and now James stood here, ready to disrupt that fragile peace. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen before: sincerity. And that scared her, not because of him, but because she might want to believe him. "Zoe is your daughter," she said, her voice even, without meeting his eyes. "I didn't list a father on her birth certificate. I didn't want her hurt by someone who wasn't ready." James nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you for telling me. I don't know how to be a father, but I want to learn. I'll do whatever you ask." Maya turned, her gaze steely. "I'm not asking anything, James. To be part of Zoe's life, you must prove it, not with words, but actions. And if you hurt her, I won't forgive you." James nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I understand. I will prove it." She pointed toward the gate. "Now go. I have a gardening class for the kids. If you're serious, come back with a plan, not just feelings." James hesitated, wanting to say more, but he knew now wasn't the time. He turned and walked out of the garden, feeling relieved and burdened. Zoe was his daughter. That truth was like a blueprint, Intricate, unfamiliar, but he was determined to learn how to read it. Meanwhile, Maya returned to the flower beds, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the hoe. She glanced toward Zoe, playing with other children nearby, her laughter ringing out. She had told James the truth, but she wasn't sure she was ready to let him in. She once remembered when Zoe's mom asked if her dad loved her, and she had answered, "Anyone who meets you will love you, Zoe." But James? Would he love Zoe as she did? Or was he only chasing redemption? That night at home, Maya checked her email. Another reminder from the garden grant about the financial report. She sighed and closed her laptop. Her life was a series of responsibilities, managing the garden, raising Zoe, and keeping them both afloat. James was unpredictable, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to face him again. She opened a drawer and pulled out an old photo of her and James beneath the oak tree. He had once sketched a house with a swing for them, but then he left, leaving her with broken pieces. She didn't want to rebuild that picture, but for Zoe, she might have to reconsider. She set the photo down and stood up as Zoe's voice called from the bedroom. "Mom, story time!" Maya smiled and walked into her daughter's room. As she told a story about a brave little girl in a magical garden, she promised herself that she would protect Zoe, whether James proved himself or not. But deep down, she knew that today's meeting had opened a door she couldn't close again. James Carter sat in his office at Carter & Company, the desk lamp casting a glow over his hand, clutching a cup of cold coffee. The image of Zoe, her blue eyes, her radiant smile, lingered in his mind like a sketch he couldn't erase. That morning, the conversation with Maya at the Harmony Garden confirmed the truth. Zoe was his daughter, but the truth didn't bring relief. It got a new weight, responsibility, regret, and whether he could become the father Zoe needed. He stared out the window at the blinking lights of Charleston, but his mind wasn't there. At the Langston estate, Sophia was waiting for an explanation about why he had walked away the night before. The door swung open, and Sophia stepped in, dressed in a form-fitting black silk dress, her blonde hair cascading freely. She folded her arms, her eyes sharp and cold. "You've been avoiding me all day, James," she said, her voice calm but laced with fury. "After last night, you owe me an explanation. Who is Maya Thompson, and why did she show up with a child?" James stood, setting the coffee down, trying to keep his tone even. "Sophia, I'm sorry I left without warning. Maya, she's someone important from my past. And Zoe, the little girl with her, is my daughter." Sophia blinked, her lips pressing into a tight line. She stepped forward, her voice low but cutting. "Your daughter? What are you talking about? How long have you known about this child?" "I just found out this morning," James replied, eyes fixed on hers. "Maya tried to tell me when she was pregnant, but I never received the messages. I was wrong, Sophia. I missed 7 years of Zoe's life, and I can't pretend that doesn't matter." Sophia let out a dry laugh, turning away, her hands sweeping through her hair. "So what now? You're going to cancel the wedding? Walk away from everything we've built? For a child you just met? James, you're the head of Carter & Company, my partner, the man my father trusts. You can't throw it all away over one mistake from the past." James stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "Zoe is not a mistake. She's my daughter. And Maya, she's not just my past. She made me realize how long I've been pretending. I can't marry you, Sophia, when my heart isn't here." Sophia turned to face him, her eyes flashing with pain and anger. "You say that after everything we've planned? The contracts, the company, our future? I love you, James. Not for your money or your name, but because you were the only man brave enough to stand up to my father, to say no to him. You're the one I chose. And now you're saying you don't want me? James bowed his head, the guilt pressing heavily on his shoulders. He remembered confronting Sophia's father, a real estate mogul, to defend a project he believed in. Sophia had looked at him with admiration then, and he had mistaken it for love. But now he realized their relationship was a transaction, a beautifully drafted blueprint, lacking a soul. I'm sorry, Sophia, he said. You deserve to be loved completely, not by a man trying to be someone he's not. Sophia stepped closer, touching his chest, her voice softening. If you need time, I can wait. But don't destroy everything over a moment of emotion. Think about the company, about our family, about all the promises we made. James gently took her hand and removed it. I made promises I couldn't keep. I need to do what's right, not just for me, but for Zoe and Maya. I don't know the future, but I can't live in a lie anymore. Sophia stepped back, her eyes turning cold. So you're choosing them. Fine, James, but don't expect me to applaud while you rebuild your life on our ruins. She turned sharply, her heels echoing off the wooden floor, leaving James silent. He sat down, rubbing his temples. The decision wasn't easy. Carter and Combine was his life's work, and Sophia had been part of the perfect blueprint he'd drawn for himself. But Zoe, the daughter he hadn't known until days ago, had changed everything. He picked up his phone and opened an email from his lawyer, a reminder about the prenuptial agreement with Sophia. He deleted the message. Instead, he opened a blank document and began typing. Plan for Zoe. Consult a family attorney. Learn how to be a father and support the Harmony Garden. He didn't know where to start, but knew he had to act. Meanwhile, at Maya's house, she sat on the porch, a cup of chamomile tea cooling in her hand. Zoe was asleep, curled up with Mr. Stripey in her room. Maya gazed at the garden, its lights softly twinkling, and thought about James. Their conversation that morning had reopened an old wound, but it also lit a dangerous glimmer of hope that maybe he truly wanted to be Zoe's father. She remembered when Zoe drew a family portrait with a vague father figure beside her. Mom, will my dad like drawing with me? Zoe had asked. Maya didn't know how to answer. But now, she had to face the possibility of James stepping into that picture. She picked up her phone and checked her email. An upcoming meeting with the garden's grant sponsor was scheduled for next week, and she needed to prepare a presentation. Her life had no room for chaos, but James had knocked on the door, and she had to decide whether to let him in. She stood, looking out toward the oak tree in the garden, where she once dreamed of building a home with James. She didn't want to dream that dream again, but for Zoe, she might have to give him a chance if he proved himself. As moonlight blanketed the garden, both James and Maya, though separated by an entire city, carried the same question in their hearts. Can we build a future from the broken pieces of our past? James Carter stood at the front porch of Maya's house, holding a paper bag with bread and a carton of orange juice, his heart pounding as if he were about to present a design to an architecture board for the first time. After last night's argument with Sophia, he had spent the entire night thinking about Zoe. The little girl he now knew was his daughter, though he barely knew her. He wanted to begin, even with a small step, and this breakfast was his first gesture of commitment. The door opened, and Maya appeared, her curly hair tied up high, her eyes cautious. James, she said evenly, you're here early. I brought breakfast, he replied, lifting the bag. And I'd like to see Zoe if that's all right. Maya crossed her arms, her gaze wary. She's drawing in the kitchen, but James, I've said this already. Zoe isn't a game for you to experiment with. If you're here, you stay. No disappearing. James nodded, his voice steady. I'm not going anywhere, Maya. I want to do this right. She sighed and opened the door wider. Come in, but gently. Zoe's more sensitive than she lets on. In the kitchen, Zoe sat at the table, legs swinging, with a colored pencil in hand, as she drew a boat on paper. She looked up, her bright blue eyes sparkling. Uncle James, she exclaimed, jumping off the chair. Do you know how to draw? I'm drawing this boat, but the ocean waves are too hard. James knelt, smiling. I know a little. Want some help? Zoe nodded eagerly and pushed the paper toward him. He picked up a pencil and sketched a few curved lines, adding waves around the boat. Like this? Zoe clapped her hands, beaming. I want the boat to have a flag, and you, too, are standing on it. She handed him a red pencil. James drew a petite figure and added a red flag on the boat. A warmth spread through his chest. He felt like more than just a stranger to Zoe for the first time. Maya stood by the doorframe, watching. She saw how Zoe smiled at James, how patiently he guided her, and her heart stirred. But she remembered the nights Zoe cried, asking why my dad wasn't here. She had comforted her daughter, assuring her that they were enough. But now James was here, and Maya wasn't sure she was ready for him to enter Zoe's world. Zoe, take your drawing out to the porch, she said. Mommy and Uncle James need to talk. Zoe ran outside, clutching the paper. Maya turned to James, her voice low. She likes you. But James, yesterday she called you Dad in her drawing. If you disappoint her, I won't forgive you. James stood, his eyes sincere. I know I haven't earned your trust, but I want to be the father Zoe needs. I've already scheduled a meeting with a family lawyer to understand custody and responsibility next week. I don't want to be a visitor in her life. Maya nodded, a bit surprised by his seriousness. Good. But I need you to understand that Zoe is my top priority. If you want to be in her life, this has to be long-term, not just a few mornings with bread. I'm committed, James said, voice firm. I'll learn how to be a father, no matter how hard it is. She looked at him, her gaze softening but still cautious. Start by being here, consistently. Zoe loves drawing and playing in the park. Next week, I have a gardening class at the community garden. If you want, you can help. James smiled, feeling like he'd just passed a test. I'll be there, and I'll bring more orange juice. Maya gave a faint laugh, though it quickly faded. She turned away and pulled plates from the cupboard. Eat before Zoe finishes all the bread. James sat on the porch beside Zoe, slicing bread for her. Zoe pointed at the drawing. Uncle James, this is me, Mommy, and you on the boat. Can I call you Daddy? The innocent question was like a sweet blade. James looked at Maya, standing at the doorway, tension in her eyes. If your mom says it's okay, he said gently. I'd love to be my best dad for you, Zoe. Zoe nodded and chewed her bread as if that answer was enough. Maya turned back into the kitchen, her hand gripping the counter. She remembered when Zoe fell at the park and cried out, Dad, though there was no one to answer. She had held her daughter and promised she'd always be there. Now James wanted to share that promise, and Maya wasn't sure she could trust him. But the joy in Zoe's face as she drew with him made her waver. That evening, Maya sat working on a grant report for the garden, but her mind wandered. She opened a drawer and pulled out the old photo of her and James beneath the oak tree. He had once drawn a swing for their dream house, but had walked away. Now he was back, not for her, but for Zoe. She set the photo down and resolved to maintain boundaries, but a small part of her wanted to believe he had changed. Meanwhile, James returned to his apartment and opened his laptop. An email from the lawyer confirmed their appointment to discuss parental rights. He picked up a piece of paper and began sketching a swing, identical to the one he once drew for Maya. He didn't know what being a father truly meant, but he knew he wanted to begin with the small things, drawing waves with Zoe, keeping promises to Maya. And as the Charleston streetlights twinkled beyond the window, James felt, for the first time in 7 years, that he was finally heading in the right direction. James Carter stepped into the Carter & Company boardroom, where his associates waited, eyes filled with curiosity and concern. The gray suit he once wore to secure multi-million-dollar deals now felt heavy. After a turbulent week, learning that Zoe was his daughter and breaking things off with Sophia, James had made the most significant life decision, resigning as company president and selling his shares. Today, he would announce it, not just to free himself from a life built on performance, but to begin anew with Zoe and Maya. He stood at the head of the table and cleared his throat. "I've thought long and hard," he began, voice low but firm. "Carter & Company has been my life's work, but I can no longer lead it. I'm resigning and selling my shares, though I'll remain on as a limited advisor. I need time to focus on my family." Silence filled the room. An older partner, Mr. Harris, furrowed his brows. "James, you're walking away from your legacy. This company carries your name. Are you sure?" James nodded, his eyes unwavering. "My real legacy is what I leave for my daughter, not the buildings." A few heads nodded in approval, but most exchanged skeptical glances. After the meeting, James returned to his office and pulled from the drawer an old sketch. A small house with a swing beneath an oak tree, one he'd drawn for Maya. He folded it carefully, slipped it into his pocket, and left the building, feeling like he had finally shed a suit of armor that no longer fit. He drove to the Harmony Community Garden, where Maya taught a group of children how to plant. Zoe ran among the vegetable beds, holding a tiny watering can. When she saw him, she squealed, "Uncle James, did you come to help me water the plants?" James knelt, smiling. "Of course. Which ones need my help?" Zoe grabbed his hand and pulled him to a row of kale, explaining everything passionately. He picked up the watering can, letting her hold his hand as water splashed on them. Her laughter made him forget the tension of the morning. From a distance, Maya watched a small trowel in hand. She saw how naturally James played with Zoe, but kept her distance. She remembered when Zoe had the flu and cried for Daddy, even though she didn't know who he was. Maya had held her daughter close, whispering that they were enough. Now James was here, and she feared Zoe would come to love him, only to be let down. But as she saw him patiently listen to Zoe talk about singing kale plants, Maya couldn't deny that he was trying. She approached, wiping her hands on her shirt. "You're just in time," she said gently. "We need someone to move the soil." James stood, chuckling. "I'm ready. But Maya, there's something I need to tell you." He took a breath. "I resigned from Carter & Co. I sold my shares and will only stay on as an advisor. I want to spend time with Zoe, and I want to help this garden, if you'll let me." Maya blinked, surprised, her eyes cautious. "Did you give up the company?" "James, that was your entire life." "No," he replied with certainty. "My life is everything I've missed. Zoe and you, if you'll give me a chance. I want to build something real, not just buildings." Maya turned away, gripping the trowel tightly. She remembered the nights she wrote grant reports for the garden, cared for Zoe, and wondered if she was strong enough. James had once walked away. Now, he stood there, ready to surrender fame and fortune. She wanted to believe him, but old wounds still made her hesitate. "That's a big step, James," she said. But Zoe needs more than promises. She needs you to show up. Every day. I will, James answered. I've already scheduled a meeting with a lawyer to discuss custody. I want to do this right. On your terms. Maya nodded, her gaze softening. Good. But I want it all in writing. Before Zoe calls you Dad. Before James could respond, his sister Emily appeared at the garden gate, wearing a red coat and eyes tense. James, we need to talk, she called, voice urgent. Maya gestured for him to go and led Zoe toward the shed. James approached Emily, frowning. What is it, Emily? She took a breath, avoiding his eyes. I knew about Zoe. Maya called me when she was pregnant. She asked if she should tell you. I told her not to, because you were building your career in Dubai. I was afraid that if you found out, you'd give up everything. James froze, the ground beneath him seeming to crack. Did you know? And you hid it from me? Emily, she's my daughter. I'm sorry, Emily said, her voice trembling. I thought I was protecting you. But now I realize I was wrong. Maya and Zoe deserved the truth. And so did you. James clenched his fists, holding back anger. But when he looked into Emily's eyes, he saw remorse. I can't change the past, he said, voice low. But from now on, I want to do right. Thank you for telling me. Emily nodded, eyes misty. Take care of them, James. Don't let them down. As Emily walked away, James returned to the garden and saw Maya and Zoe laughing near the flower beds. He reached into his pocket and touched the swing sketch, a reminder of his desire to build. He didn't just want to be Zoe's father. He wanted to prove to Maya that he was no longer the man who walked away. As sunlight washed over the garden, James knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time, he felt he belonged. Maya Thompson stood in her kitchen, the hanging light glowing over the cream-colored envelope on the table. Sophia Langston had come by that morning, just as Maya was preparing for her gardening class at the Harmony Community Garden. Without a greeting, Sophia handed her the envelope and said, "This belongs to you." Inside was an old letter, James's handwriting, written from Dubai 7 years ago. Maya, I'm sorry. I don't know how to come back, but I haven't forgotten you. A letter Maya had never seen. The apology James never sent. Sophia had kept it, and now she was returning it. A silent declaration of war. Maya gripped the table's edge, her eyes fixed on the letter. She remembered those early months after James left, when she was pregnant with Zoe, sitting on the porch, waiting for any sign from him. Had it reached her back then, this letter might have changed everything. But now, it had arrived too late, and she didn't know if it was an apology or just another burden. Zoe's soft humming from the living room pulled her back to the present. Maya folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket, determined not to let the past shake the life she had built. She walked out to the garden, where James was helping Zoe water the sunflower beds. He wore a simple t-shirt, his hands covered in dirt, laughing as Zoe instructed him on the right way to pour water. Maya stopped, her heart tightening as she watched Zoe grip James's hand and call him Daddy. She had agreed to let James show up consistently, but every time Zoe smiled at him, Maya's fear returned. Fear that he'd leave again, fear that Zoe would get hurt, and fear that she might believe in him again. James, she called, her voice calm but firm. We need to talk. Zoe, help Grandma Ruth slice carrots, okay? Zoe nodded and ran inside, leaving James and Maya under the oak tree. James wiped his hands on his shirt, looking nervous. What's wrong, Maya? She pulled the letter from her pocket and handed it to him. Sophia came this morning. She gave me this. You wrote it, didn't you? Why didn't I get it? James took the letter, his eyes widening in shock as he recognized his handwriting. I wrote this, right after I arrived in Dubai. I wanted to send it but thought you'd be better off without me. I was wrong, Maya. I didn't know Sophia kept it. Maya crossed her arms, her voice cold. 7 years, James. I waited for you. I called. I wrote letters. Nothing. I raised Zoe alone, paid hospital bills, and told her stories when she asked about her father. You don't get to walk in now and expect everything to be easy. James lowered his head, his voice rough. I know I can't fix the past, but I'm here for Zoe and you if you'll let me. I've resigned from the company. I'm working with a lawyer to ensure I take full responsibility. I want to prove I've changed. Maya stepped closer, her eyes blazing. Prove it? Is showing up for a few weeks enough? Zoe draws pictures of you and calls you Dad. If you walk away again, she won't just lose you. She'll lose trust in me for letting you in. James looked at her, his eyes pained but resolute. I'm not going anywhere. I canceled my wedding with Sophia. I sold my company shares. I want to build a real life, with Zoe, and hopefully with you. But I was hoping you could tell me what to do. Maya turned away, her hands trembling slightly. She remembered the night Zoe asked Mom if Daddy loved her. She had replied that her dad was far away, but now James was here, and she didn't know whether to let him closer. Stay, she said, her voice quiet but clear. Not just today, every day. Take Zoe to school, help with the garden, and read to her. And don't make promises you can't keep. James nodded, eyes locked on hers. I promise. And I'll keep that promise, no matter how hard it is. She looked at him and saw the sincerity, but kept her distance. I can't forgive you right away, James. Not because of the letter, but because of the years. I had to be strong alone. But for Zoe, I'll give you a chance. Before James could respond, Zoe ran out and hugged Maya's leg. Mom, is Daddy James staying for dinner? Grandma Ruth is making pizza. She looked up at James, her eyes shining. James knelt, smiling. If your mom says yes, then I'd love to. He turned to Maya, waiting. Maya sighed and nodded. Stay, but you're doing the dishes. Zoe squealed with joy, dragging James inside. Maya lingered beneath the oak tree, her hand brushing the letter in her pocket. She hadn't forgiven him, but Zoe's smile when she called him Dad shook something in her. She remembered sitting here, pregnant with Zoe, convincing herself she didn't need James. Now he was here, and she had to decide whether to let him become part of the family Zoe was drawing in her heart. That night, in the kitchen, Ruth watched Maya prep the pizza, her eyes perceptive. He's trying, Ruth said. But are you sure you're ready to let him in again? Maya sliced tomatoes, her voice low. For Zoe, I'll try, but I won't let him hurt her, or me. Ruth nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than he is, Maya. Don't forget that. As James read to Zoe in the living room, his voice soft, telling a story about a boat that sailed through storms, Maya stood at the doorway, watching. She didn't know if James would keep his promise, but for the first time, she saw a glimmer of hope. Not for a love lost, but for a family Zoe truly deserved. And under the kitchen light, James's letter rested in a drawer. Not a burden, but a reminder that she held the power to shape what came next. James Carter stood in the middle of Harmony Community Garden, shovel in hand, sweat beading on his forehead. Today marked the groundbreaking ceremony for a new footbridge project, an initiative led by Maya to connect the two neighborhoods, divided by the stream cutting through James Island. The sound of hammers and saws blended with children's laughter and the hum of volunteers chatting. Zoe came skipping toward him, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. "Daddy James, look! I picked flowers for the bridge," she cried, eyes sparkling. James knelt and smiled. "These are beautiful, Zoe. Where do you want to put them?" She pointed to a newly built wooden railing. "There, so everyone can see." He took her hand and led her to the railing, helping her tie the flowers with a red ribbon. Zoe's joy warmed his heart and reminded him that fatherhood wasn't just made of tender moments. It was a lifetime commitment. From a distance, Maya watched clipboard in hand, standing beside a group of volunteers. She saw James's patience with Zoe, and part of her wanted to believe he had truly changed. But the years she had raised Zoe alone weren't easy to forget. She remembered when Zoe asked Mom why Dad wasn't here when I was little. She'd told her James was away, busy and far. But now he was here, and Maya feared Zoe would love him too deeply, only to be hurt. She walked over, voice soft. "James, can you help carry some lumber? We need to finish the railing before sunset." James wiped his hands on his shirt and nodded. "Of course. Zoe, stay with Mommy, okay?" Zoe nodded, hugging Maya's leg. James returned to work, but his gaze lingered on them. He wasn't just building a bridge across a stream, but across the fractured past. During the lunch break, Maya received an email. The garden's grant application had been approved, new funding for their after-school program. She smiled, but that smile faded when a volunteer handed her a local newspaper. The headline read, "Millionaire James Carter abandons empire to make amends for abandoning daughter." The article described him as the man who left Zoe, quoting anonymous voices from Charleston's upper circles. Maya looked across the garden. James was sitting under the oak tree with Zoe, sharing a sandwich. She walked over and handed him the paper. "You should read this," she said flatly. James skimmed the article, his expression darkening. Zoe looked up, curious. "Daddy, what is it?" James forced a smile, folding the paper. "Just paper, Zoe. Nothing important." But his eyes met Maya's, and she knew it mattered. "I'll take care of it," he said quietly. That afternoon, the ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a crowd beneath the oak tree. The mayor stood on a small podium, praising the bridge as a symbol of unity. James was invited to speak. He stepped to the microphone, scanning the crowd until his gaze landed on Maya and Zoe. "This bridge," he began, voice steady, "doesn't just connect two neighborhoods. It reminds us that what has been divided can be healed with truth, effort, and love. I've missed out on a lot in my life, but today, I stand here not just to build a bridge, but to rebuild my family." Applause followed until a reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Carter, the article today called you the man who abandoned his daughter. How do you respond?" James inhaled deeply and looked at Zoe, who held Maya's hand. "I'm sorry for the years I wasn't there for my daughter, Zoe," he said, voice raw. "I can't change the past, but I promise to be the father she deserves. From this day forward." He turned to Maya, his eyes sincere. "And I thank her mother, Maya, for giving me this chance." The crowd went quiet, then burst into heartfelt applause. Maya lowered her head, hiding a small smile. She hadn't forgiven him entirely, but his words said in front of everyone were a start. Zoe ran over and hugged James's leg. "Daddy, I love the bridge. Can I walk on it?" James picked her up, grinning. "Of course, but with Mommy too." He looked at Maya, hopeful. She nodded. Hand in hand, The three of them walked across the new wooden planks. As they reached the center, Maya felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. Not for herself, but for Zoe. Back home, Maya sat with Ruth that evening, recounting the day's ceremony. Ruth sipped tea, her eyes observant. She said he stood in front of all those people. For Zoe. But are you sure you're ready to let him in again? Maya looked out at the oak tree swaying in the dusk. I'm not sure, Mom. But Zoe needs a father. And if James keeps his word, I won't stand in the way. She opened a drawer, took out James's old letter, and laid it on the table. I'm not forgiving him because of this letter. I'm doing it because Zoe deserves a whole family. In the living room, James read aloud to Zoe, his voice tender as he told a story about a bridge that led to a happy home. Maya stood at the doorway, her heart lighter, if only slightly. Beneath the moonlight, the newly built bridge outside gleamed like a quiet promise that what was once broken could be rebuilt if they tried together. James Carter stood beneath the oak tree at the Langston estate, where his wedding to Sophia Langston was about to occur. The soft strains of a violin floated through the air, mingling with whispers from guests seated on rows of white chairs. Sunlight filtered gently through the leaves, but James's heart pounded, not from nerves about the ceremony, but because of a truth he could no longer ignore. Zoe, his daughter, and Maya, the woman he once left behind, were among the crowd. He spotted them. Maya in a pale blue dress, holding Zoe's hand. The little girl wore a white dress, with a daisy pinned to her chest. Zoe's bright blue eyes met his, and she waved, beaming. Sophia stepped forward, radiant in a shimmering silk gown, her blonde hair swept into an elegant bun. The crowd murmured in admiration, but her eyes scanned James's face with a chill of suspicion. After last week's heated argument, she had agreed to proceed with the wedding, on one condition. James must keep Maya and Zoe from interfering with their future. But as the music shifted to the bridal march, James knew he could no longer keep that promise. He walked to the altar, raised his hand, and signaled for the musicians to stop. A hush fell over the gathering. Sophia's brows furrowed. Her lips tightened. "James, what are you doing?" she whispered tensely. James took a deep breath, turning to the crowd. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice trembling but clear. "I can't go through with this wedding." Gasps rippled across the guests. Sophia froze, her hand clenching the bouquet. James looked at her with sincerity. "Sophia, you deserve someone who loves you completely. I'm not that man." He turned toward Zoe, standing beside Maya, and dropped to one knee. "That little girl, Zoe, is my daughter. I've missed so many years of her life and can't pretend anymore. I want to be the father she needs, and if she'll have me, the partner her mother deserves." He looked up at Maya, hoping to fill his eyes. "I'm sorry for walking away 7 years ago. I'm here now, and I want to build a real family." Silence. Then, a wave of applause broke through the crowd. Zoe ran forward, wrapping her arms around James. "Daddy, you're staying with me, right?" James hugged her tight, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I'm staying, Zoe. Forever." Maya stood frozen, holding Zoe's small hand, her expression wavering between emotion and caution. She stepped forward, her voice low but steady. "James, beautiful words aren't enough. Zoe needs more than promises. I need more than promises. If you want us, you have to show us, not today, but every day." James rose, still holding Zoe, his eyes never leaving Maya. "I will show you, Maya. I've resigned from my company and sold my shares. I'm working with a lawyer to secure shared custody. I want to do this right, for Zoe and, hopefully, for you." Sophia, pale and trembling, turned away, Her silk gown rustled as she stepped off the altar. She paused and looked back one last time. "You've made your choice, James. Good luck." Her voice was cold, but her eyes betrayed pain. Then, she disappeared into the murmuring crowd. Emily, James's sister, came forward and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "I'm proud of you, no matter what anyone says." She glanced at Maya with a small smile. "She's strong, James. Don't let her down." Maya led Zoe away from the crowd, shielding her from prying eyes. In a quiet garden corner, she knelt beside her daughter. "Mommy, is Daddy staying?" Zoe asked, her voice trembling. Maya smoothed back her hair, her gaze tender. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I promise I'll always be here." She looked up and saw James watching from a distance, determination in his eyes. She remembered the nights she held Zoe close, telling stories about a happy family she wasn't sure could ever be real. Now James stood here, offering to make that dream come true. But could she believe him? At home, Maya sat with Ruth that evening, recounting the day's events. Ruth sipped her tea, her eyes sharp as ever. She said he called off the wedding in front of the whole city. But do you forgive him? Maya looked out at the oak tree on the porch, the same one they once dreamed of building a home under. "Not yet," she said, "but I see him trying, for Zoe. I'll give him time, but I won't let him hurt her, or me." Ruth nodded, placing a steady hand over hers. "You're stronger than he is, Maya. Let him prove himself, but never forget your strength." James sat beside Zoe in the living room, reading a story about a brave girl crossing a magical bridge. Zoe leaned into him, her eyes fluttering closed. "Daddy, can we go to the park tomorrow?" she murmured. James smiled and kissed her forehead. "Of course, Zoe." He looked up and saw Maya standing at the doorway. Her expression was softer now, but still guarded. Under the warm light, James understood that rebuilding trust wouldn't be easy, not just with Zoe, but with Maya. And that would be the greatest challenge of all. Maya Thompson stood on the front porch, moonlight casting shadows through the basil pots onto the wooden floorboards. Under the old oak tree, lanterns shimmered where a small group of friends and family had gathered. There were no glass tents or orchestras, just soft laughter and the scent of homemade pie drifting from the kitchen. James Carter stood on the lawn, adjusting his tie, his eyes sparkling with nervous energy. He was no longer the millionaire in an expensive suit, but a simple man ready to begin again. Zoe ran in circles, her white dress fluttering, a daisy crown atop her head, and a tiny bouquet in her hand. "Mom, did Daddy James bring the swing?" she asked, her voice bright with excitement. Maya smiled, brushing Zoe's hair back. "You'll see. Just a little patience, sweetheart." She looked at James, who spoke with his sister Emily and her mother, Ruth. Since calling off his wedding with Sophia Langston, James had spent weeks showing up, walking Zoe to school, helping in the Harmony Garden, and reading bedtime stories. He had signed a co-parenting agreement with Maya, committed to legal responsibility, and started volunteering with her community project. More than words, those actions had slowly rebuilt Maya's trust. James stepped over, holding a package wrapped in brown paper. He knelt in front of Zoe, smiling. "Guess what I brought?" Zoe clapped her hands, eyes wide. "The swing!" James opened the bundle to reveal cedarwood planks and thick ropes, just like the sketch he had once shown Maya. "That's right," he said, "but I need you and your mom to help hang it." Zoe squealed and hugged him tightly. Maya watched, her heart pounding. She remembered nights sitting under that same oak, pregnant with Zoe, dreaming of a family she thought she'd never have. James had once walked away, leaving behind shattered hopes. But now he was here, rebuilding piece by piece. She stepped forward, the hem of her pale blue dress brushing the grass. "You're serious about this swing?" she asked, a playful lilt in her voice. James stood, his gaze steady. "Not just the swing, Maya. I want to build a life with you and Zoe." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a silver ring engraved with a leaf motif. "I know I haven't earned your forgiveness right away, but I want to be the father Zoe deserves. And if you'll let me, I want to be by your side. Maya, will you marry me?" Maya froze, her hand covering her mouth. The small crowd, Emily, Ruth, and a few garden volunteers, fell silent. Zoe tugged at Maya's hand and whispered, "Say yes, Mom. Daddy James made the swing for me." Maya laughed through her tears. She looked at James and saw not empty promises, but a man who had shown his commitment daily. "I haven't fully forgiven you," she said, her voice trembling. "But for Zoe, and because I see how hard you're trying, I say yes. But James, if you hurt us again—" "I won't," James interrupted, slipping the ring onto her finger. "I promise, I'll prove it every single day." He embraced her, and Zoe squeezed between them, squealing, "Our family has a swing." The crowd applauded. Ruth smiled as she wiped away a tear. "He's better than I thought," she whispered to Emily. Emily nodded, her eyes proud. "He's learning how to do things right." After the engagement, James, Maya, and Zoe worked together to hang the swing under the oak. James tied the ropes, Maya checked the balance, and Zoe climbed on, laughing as it swayed. "Higher, Daddy!" she cried. James gave a gentle push, his eyes locked on Maya. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me this chance." Maya looked at him, her hand touching the ring. "Don't thank me. Thank Zoe. She's the reason I stayed." She remembered the drawing Zoe once made of a family with a faceless father figure. That image was now real, but she still needed boundaries. "We take this slow, James. I need time." James nodded, his eyes soft. "I'll wait as long as it takes." Back inside, Maya sat with Ruth that evening, recounting the moment he proposed. Ruth sipped her tea, her eyes keen. "Are you sure you're ready?" she asked. "He's changed, but you've endured a lot." Maya glanced at the oak, where the swing gently rocked in the moonlight. "I'm not sure, Mom, but Zoe deserves a family, and I want to believe James will keep his word. I won't let the past control our future." James sat with Zoe in the living room, reading a story about a little girl and her parents building a home beneath a magical oak. Zoe drifted to sleep, clutching Mr. Stripey. James looked up and saw Maya at the doorway, her expression softer than ever. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, he felt like he belonged, not in a glass tower, but in this humble home with Maya and Zoe. As moonlight bathed the oak tree, Maya touched the ring, feeling the weight of a new beginning. Not perfect, but real, built on truth, patience, and love. A family Zoe had always dreamed of, and maybe, deep down, Maya had too.